These are all well-known or influential Zen masters who, after the fact, had their sayings and teachings organized along particular lines. And so this house of Yunmen really revolves around Yunmen and is also influenced by teachers in some of the other houses as well. So let's start out looking at this house. Let's go through these readings for this house. And we can do what we've done in the past, just starting at the beginning and slowly working our way through. And so, you know, find those places that you've underlined or written notes in your margins or put little stars. So Zui Feng, in his sayings, in this very first section, the whole universe, the whole world is you. Do you think there is any other? This is why the heroic progress scripture says people lose themselves pursuing things. If they could turn things around, they would be the same as Buddha. So this heroic progress scripture is the Surangama Sutra. So if any of you have studied or made note of the Surangama Sutra, that's where that is coming from. And I want to, before we get too far into this, I just want to respond to your comment, Lexi, about not being a Buddhist scholar, in that for this class, you're not expected to be.
Yes, I realize that.
And that, like, the whole point that inspired me to want to offer this was just to have the chance to go with you guys through some of these teachings by these masters and just become familiar with the language, so that when we encounter it later on, if we're reading Dogen or some of the other more recent Zen teachers, then there'll be that little spark of familiarity. Oh, I've heard this before somewhere. Okay, I've got a sense of what this is. I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems a little familiar. So this is just to start that process of familiarity. So there's no expectation to get it all figured out or remember who's who. With these guys, I still have to stop and look them up and figure out who's who. And oh yeah, this guy was a student of that guy. And oh, these guys are really 200 years apart and they never knew each other, but they're still commenting on, you know, one is commenting on the other's teachings. It's intricate stuff, it's subtle stuff, and it is not separate from what we bring to it. So there's a component of ourselves that we will find in these readings. So returning to Sui Feng, in that third section, at the beginning of his section, the paragraph that starts terms for the one mind or Buddha nature, and he goes through and he goes through and he goes through, and then he gets to universal mirror-like cognition. I'm pretty sure we saw that with Baizhang. Was Baizhang the one that used that term often? It was one of the masters in the first house that we looked at. But even reading through those names for one mind, there was still that recognition of, oh, I know we read somebody who used to use that term, universal mirror-like cognition. So there's something there that's recognizable. Anything jump out for anybody else on that first page? Anything?
For me, the first sentence, I highlighted the first sentence, and I thought, well, what more is there to say? But I had hopes for the rest of the reading, because that first sentence was just so wonderful, and I felt like I really knew what it was saying, but kind of went downhill from there. but I love the first sentence.
The whole universe. The whole universe.
Yeah, the whole universe, the whole world is you. Do you think there is any other?
So there's a saying in Buddhism, or a teaching in Buddhism, and I don't remember where it popped up, like where in the history it pops up, but it makes a comparison of Dharma teachings to medicine. And the reminder there is that if Dharma is medicine, then we need to take up what is our medicine, and what is medicine for us. What is medicine for me might be poison for you. And so if you were encountering these readings and some of them are like, that's your medicine. You encounter them, you go, oh. Like, don't contort yourself too much to try to figure it out. There will be a time when that growl turns into a sigh of relief, but nobody knows when that will happen. And that analogy of Dharma to medicine or poison also has a little bit of a comparison, or a sister parable in the Lotus Sutra. There's a parable called the parable of the medicinal herbs. And in that parable, it likens the Dharma to rain that falls in nature. And each plant takes up as much Dharma as it needs. Each plant takes up as much nourishment as it needs. The small plants take up a small amount, and the medium plants take up a medium amount, and the big giant plants take up a big giant amount. So as we encounter this literature, take up what you need. And if there's extra, don't worry about it.
Very reassuring.
So in the second part of Sui Feng's sayings, at the section that says, look at these grown-ups traveling to the ends of the earth, there's a reference there where is it? There's references there to wild foxes. So broadcasting this sort of bad breath, the minute you get started, you enter a wild fox cave. Taking the servant for the master, you do not know pollution from purity. Deceiving yourselves from the present, at the end of your lives, you will turn out to be nothing more than a bunch of wild foxes. So I'm going to give you an assignment. And that assignment is to go look up a wild fox koan. And, that's one name for it. And like most things that are stored in my memory, I forget the other names for it. Somebody's diligently looking it up right now.
Aishang spots, or
Yeah.
I know one from heart, but
Okay. But so this is the koan that's being referenced here, and like our school doesn't do a whole lot with formal koan study, but among Soto Zen teachers, this is the one that's probably referenced the most. So if I ask you to learn about any of the koans and any of the koan collections, this is the one that I would say it might be worthwhile to know. And somewhere, I can't remember if it's still on the Dharma Rain site, there's a sort of Kyogen's explanation of that. I don't know if it's a talk or a writing, but if you can't find it, let me know and I'll dig it up. Deiko, do you remember him talking about that one?
yes, and it's part of a Dharma talk, and I know it well because
Oh, did you transcribe it?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I did not have the pleasure of transcribing that one, but probably 5 or 6 years ago, I did a student talk on Baizhang Fox, and I don't think you were there. But so um, it's a complicated story, and he really shed light on it beautifully, as he had that talent of doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got a memory of him talking about it, and in my memory, like the location is foremost, and so I just have a very visceral memory of being in the old Dharma house living room,
Mm.
and he's sitting in front of the fireplace
Mm.
talking about that koan.
Mm.
Um,
I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have that referenced in my notes for that talk. So I'll be happy to send out that link to the group. I think it's on audio on the Dharma Rain website.
yeah, and I think there's many Zen teachers have talked about it. So even if we hunt down Kyogen's commentary on it or Kyogen's explanation of it, I would encourage you to go find other sources that are also talking about this koan.
I just did a check on Google, and there are a lot.
Yes, yes. This is a
But
well-known one.
this wild fox is mentioned more than several times in the readings we did for today, is it not?
Probably. It's yeah. That's one of those phrases that sort of is code in Zen. That business of wild fox, or being a wild fox, or having a wild fox spirit. You'll see it again and again and again.
So this isn't the first time we've encountered caves either.
Mm.
And every time we do, I think of Plato's cave.
Mm.
I know what the wild foxes are, but it seems applicable, Plato's cave, because you're talking about wild foxes as a derogatory term for a seeker, I guess. And that's what Plato's cave is, that you're being fooled. You're not really seeing what you think you're seeing. And I don't know if it's the same thing, but all you have to do is leave the cave and you'll be all right.
Yeah, in this fox koan, a student asks a master, and this is my paraphrase of it, so I'm sure I'll leave out bits and pieces. A student asks a master, does an enlightened person, how does it go? Does an enlightened person fall into karma or not? Or is an enlightened person caught by karma or not? And the master answers, no. And he's reborn in the form of a wild fox. And he spends 500 lifetimes being reborn again and again and again as a wild fox. And then the story shifts, and there's Baizhang or Zhao is teaching in his hall, and he notices an old man in the back of the hall that he doesn't recognize. And he goes out, after the assembly leaves, he goes out to greet him and ask him where he came from. And he said, for 500 lifetimes, I've been reborn as a wild fox. And he tells his story about the question that he was asked, does an enlightened person fall into karma or not? And Baizhang says, ask me the question. And so the old man asks him the question, and Baizhang said, an enlightened person, and I just remember Kyogen's way of phrasing it, an enlightened person is not deceived by karma. And in that moment, something shifted for the old man, and he thanked Baizhang for the answer, and he said, in a cave on the other side of the mountain, you'll find the dead body of a wild fox. Thank you for releasing me. Or he says some such thing. And so Baizhang, and he disappears. Baizhang gets his monks together and he says, we're going to go do a monastic funeral. Make sure you have all your things. And so his monks prepare for a monastic funeral, and they go, traipsing around the mountain, and they find a cave with the body of a fox in it, and they give the fox a full monastic funeral. And his monks are like, what is this? What are we doing this? And so Baizhang then tells the story about the wild fox spirit. And so that in Zen, there's that sense of like being a wild fox as like being one who is caught, especially caught in this question of karma, or this question of being deluded by karma or deceived. So yes, it's not a like having the idea of being a wild fox spirit applied to you is probably not the best thing in Zen. And I'm not quite sure if the symbolism of the cave is the same as what you're talking about or different than what you're talking about, but it makes me think of dark and light. And in Zen, dark is seen as pointing towards emptiness, because everything is the same in the dark. So it points towards that one mark, or that common element of emptiness that everything has. And then light tends to refer to the relative, or the mundane world, because everything is distinguished in the light. Everything, all the differences are known, all the unique aspects are seen. So I don't know if that cave part falls into that or not, but that's where my mind goes. Peter, do you know anything more about caves in terms of Chan?
Not a lot. I do know that one of the differences that's pointed out between Soto and Rinzai or Rinzai is that the symbology of often in Soto meditation, people meditate with their eyes open, looking at the wall, whereas in Rinzai, people meditate with their eyes closed, and there's an illusion in that that people sitting with their eyes closed are sitting watching the reflections of the cave. So they're trapped in a cave. So there is, that's, when I tend to think of caves, I like to think of Han Shan. So where did he go? Where's the cave?
Nice. Who's got the cat? I'm curious.
That's my cat.
That's your cat?
That's our cat, Spider. Spider. She's very vocal.
Spider?
Yeah, Spider. Because she climbs like a spider monkey. But her real name is Moondance. She's very vocal. She's 16 years old.
Oh, very sweet.
Yeah, she knows her stuff.
You know, I was trying to look at the negative implication of the fox. I had read a commentary. I was just trying to find out whose commentary it was, because like you said, you know, the fox has a negative implication, and yet when I looked at old ancient Chinese depictions of wild foxes, they were mostly beautiful and adorable and playful and mischievous. So and one of the commentaries, Wu Men's commentary, not falling into causation. Why was he turned into a fox? why was he released from the fox body? If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know that the former head of the monastery did enjoy his 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox. I love that. That just tickled me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He wasn't a miserable fox,
He was a happy, playful fox.
but he was a fox.
Yeah, but he wasn't a human. Yeah,
He was stuck in the body of a
he
fox. And in
was.
Buddhist cosmology, being human is the highest form because it's easiest to become enlightened.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if that's still true.
Hmm.
Well, it raises the question, how many lifetimes did it take for him to realize that he was a fox, not a human, as well, because there's that issue of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I did transcribe that talk after all because I found the transcription. Anyway.
Shall we move on to Yuman?
There was one other, yeah, so, gosh, I don't know what page, but in the first section, the paragraph
Of Yunmen or?
of, is that who, the first writer?
Oh, no.
I forgot his name
Sui
already.
Feng.
Sui Feng,
Sui Feng.
the paragraph after the one that you cited that starts to look at these grown-ups.
Mhm.
The next one, if you immediately realize being so, the next after the little section.
Yeah.
So in the second paragraph of that, it says, the sentence that jumped out at me was, right now, what you lack. Kitty.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I don't know.
You're drawn to those sort of universal statements in this section.
I guess I am. I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, right now, what you lack. It's
Yeah.
so clear, yeah.
And
So
that's,
on that line, the next line,
Mhm.
something that I think applies to our current political situation that everybody is maligning. The business of the responsible individual has been as clear as the bright sun in the blue sky for all time.
Hmm.
I think you could pretty much sum it up as everybody needs to take responsibility for themselves right now.
Well, I underlined about two things in the whole section, but in the final paragraph, do you know this is not something verbal?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a theme or a red thread through all our readings.
Mm-hmm.
Especially this house. I like the paragraph.
Yeah.
Too before that. If I were to tell you that in order to understand this, you would have to take half a step to exercise the slightest bit of effort to read a single word of scripture or to explicitly ask questions to you, I would be deceiving and threatening you.
Yep.
To me, that reads differently than those words there that you say, oh yeah, that's a threat. If you had to do something, that would be a threat. You're not. You just want words. You don't want to actually do anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
I use that, going back to that question that you pointed out, Teiko, right now, what do you lack? I'll use that from time to time when I start to feel stress about something. That's my sort of go-to reminder that really, right now, things are okay. There's not a lack. And I remember Kyogen quoting his teacher, Roshi Kennett, as saying something to the effect of, the present moment lacks for nothing, yet needs something. What is it? Which points to this sense of, yes, nothing is lacking, and we need to have some effect. We need to do something, whether it's sitting still, whether it's turning our attention in a particular way, whether it's picking up a phone, whether it's something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The practice of Zen is not disappearing from the world. The practice of Zen is not stopping our thoughts so completely that there's no consciousness there.
So Roshi Kennett said this is this moment lacks for nothing, and what was the second part?
Yet needs something.
Yet needs something.
They repeat the sentiment that Takeo pointed out is repeated in the next section. Do not misunderstand. Right now, what is the matter? That's what I highlighted.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's move on to Yunmen then. So Dixie pointed out the last sentence of the first section of Yunmen.
Joshin, can I just say that I laughed out loud on this section, this whole part. I mean, I just enjoyed it so much and just laughed and had fun reading things over and over again, and just so clever and such a good writer, and so snarky. I just love the snark, and it made me wonder what if Yun Men, if these are attributed to that person, or if it's just an idea of these sayings, what they would have to say about Western Buddhism right now. They probably would be pretty critical of the cult of personality, the way Western Buddhism has kind of become that way. New Ageism and kind of just, I don't know. It's kind of the way there are certain parts of Buddhism that have become very commercialized, the marketing and everything. And I think because he talks about that. I mean, here's this is thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. I just love it. He just made me laugh. So I liked it. And I wrote down all kinds of stuff about thieving phonies and the people boring people miserably and getting excited with bags and bowls and talking, are you not an adult? You have to find your own way. I just thought he was, really, really mouths like asses, questions and answers. It's all empowerment of the people. You don't need to sit and listen to these people go on and on. I just thought it was really, really funny and really good. I mean, it was like he was just like, I liked it a lot. So.
Yep. He taught in his context. And there are ways that we can look back and say, oh yeah, we like that there's something that we appreciate. And there's also a way in which Western Buddhism arises in its own context and exists in a particular way due to its own causes and conditions. There's a way we can appreciate a sharp, direct teacher, but I don't know if I would want to be in his meditation hall. It makes me think of, so in our meditation hall, the Shuso carries a stick called a kyosaku through the hall in the mornings. And that stick traditionally has been used to hit people on the shoulders during sesshin, when backs are tired and people are sleepy. And we used to use it that way in the Zendo, with the caveat that you had to ask for it. Whereas in centuries past, you might not have had a choice. But we discovered over the years that incidences of trauma from child abuse is so prevalent in our society, and people are so triggered by that stick, or even the idea of being hit with a stick, that we stopped carrying it. And that's one of the ways in which the forms held by our lineage get adapted to our culture. It doesn't make sense to use a stick to help people awaken if that stick is re-traumatizing. So now we carry it in a ceremonial way just to keep the form a little bit, but we certainly don't use it on people anymore. So just some thoughts there.
Well, in the next section, they talk about thrashing a lot, which is good. It's a tongue lashing. Young men gives people tongue lashings instead of thrashings.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that shows up in Zen literature a lot, is that there's the verbal sparring, and given that so often we're pointing to something that is beyond the verbal, you will often read about blows or physical thrashings or a student striking his master. These are all like physical ways of showing instead of explaining. And that's one of the things that teachers look for when their students are like trying to talk about insight or an understanding is, you know, how often is it an attempt to explain versus an attempt to show? So, you know, we'll run into these descriptions of attempts to show. And sometimes those attempts to show fall short, and the teacher's sent back to go sit some more.
I mean, the student could, or the teacher could just as easily give the student a kiss or a hug as a smack him or her.
Yeah,
I
usually
mean,
it's something startling.
something startling, something inappropriate, seemingly.
An attempt to shift perspective or to nudge somebody out of a viewpoint that has become ingrained and habitual. Can you see with fresh eyes?
Yeah.
There's a notice to be here. It's on page 106, about halfway down. It made me really crack up laughing when I read it because I liked it. And the minute you see some old monk open his mouth, you should shut him right up.
Yep.
Instead, you act like green flies in a pile of manure, struggling to consume it.
Yep.
Gathering together in groups for discussion, you bore others miserably. And I just laughed when I saw it because it's terrific. But also, too,
there's no room for a yes man.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that stuff that's in the sayings of Mounier. But one I marked just to, because I did like it, I noted, was having entered the Dharma, and our conversation has been going this way, having entered the Dharma hall for formal instruction, Master Yun Men said after a long time, is there anybody at all who can say it?
Yeah.
Let the one who can step forward. And the assembly remained silent. The master picked up his staff and said, my challenge before was a small trench full of shit. And the lifting of my staff right now is a big one. The master stepped down from his seat. And then there's a note here, which is where I was going to. It's a discussion about Dogen in chapter 39 of the Shobogenzo. And what the discussion and this is what is being talked about here is, how do you express how I'll read what it said, the ability of expression acquired overtones, but the overtones in Soto are slightly different. But if you're trying to express enlightenment or express something, how do you express it?
That's the main
and
question.
I think that's really very nice, because you express it through a hug or hitting somebody with a stick, or how do you communicate what you're trying to express?
Yeah.
And I think that's really nice. So anyway.
No, that's one of the key points. And it's one of the things I appreciate about Zen is that it's not enough to, or I'm not going to say it's not enough to, but having an experience of awakening is not all of it. There's still work to do. And integrating and expressing and allowing that awakening to be of benefit to the world is also a part of it. So in this section on Yunmen, one of the sentences that I underlined is on page 107, the very bottom. Someday, in the presence of death, your verbal explanations will not be accepted. And it just takes me back to that sense of, in that moment, what is true? Like entering the bardo, showing up in front of Lord Yama, trying to explain to him, not it. It's not it. So what else is there? And taking every moment as birth and death. What matters? It's not always words. I'm clocking the time. It's 4:54, and I wanted to take a break and then have some time for you guys to talk and share some of these phrases. So what we might do is take a break until 5, and I realize we haven't gone through the other 2.5 teachers in this section. So when we come back, if you want to pull out phrases from these sections that touched you, we can do that. Or if you want to pull out phrases from previous sections as well, you can do that. It helps if you let us know what page you're on, or Takeo, I know you're reading on a Kindle. If you could just give us a general sense, we could try to follow along. So let's take a break until 5 o'clock, and then when we come back, I'll try to talk less and you guys can share more. How's that sound? All right, see you at 5.
What's the matter, Pumpkin? Can't go out. Pumpkin, you can't go out. Roscoe? You want to go out with kids, don't you? Come on. Come on, little kid. Roscoe, you go out.
Lexi, did you get any more news on your hip?
Nope, no more news. Well, no more news. It's getting better.
I'm glad.
It's getting
Right.
better. I still
Just-
don't, I don't feel like I want to go walking, but it is getting better.
Just maybe needed some rest.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced it was whatever he said, whatever he sort of concluded it was, but I haven't gotten anything back from the x-rays, so
Mm.
presumably it's nothing awful. Yeah.
Well, they should tell you something about the x-rays at
They
some
will
point.
eventually. They will
Yeah.
eventually. Probably Monday. Did I leave my blue water bottle?
Yes,
at your
yes,
house?
you did. I'll bring it by.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll run it over tonight.
Oh, okay.
I like your
Don't
image
hurry
and
about it. What?
your little picture. Yeah, the diamond exploding light.
Oh,
I loved that photograph. I thought, oh, that would be a good little profile thing.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind that I'm using it.
No.
I recognize that.
Shall we begin? There's silence.
I highlighted the sentence, consciousness is a source of great problems. That was just, amen, amen.
And if you have something longer, feel free to share that as well. I was just looking over the projects on the syllabus. For each class, participants will select a phrase from the readings and write a reflective response to it. Reflective responses can be prose, poetry, or artwork. Each participant will have an opportunity to share their reflective responses with the class. These reflective responses are not an intellectual analysis or explanation of meaning. They're expressions of what the phrase brings up for you and how the phrase is being integrated into your own vocabulary and life of practice. It's about you. So what was that phrase again, Dixie?
That wasn't one that would do that for me, but I just got
Yeah, no, but I just wanted to hear it again.
consciousness is a source of great problems.
Yes. Yes.
It's fabulous.
I did have one that brought up what you were talking about, a reflective response.
Mhm.
That's on page 115, further along. Nature is the attainment of non-being. Ultimate non-being does not mean non-existence. It emerges at birth and submerges at death without itself being dying or being born. And that really linked into a concept that I've been trying to work into a fiction story for some time. The idea of the people in the land being one, that what we are not different from it and it is not different from us. We simply have the ability to choose, whereas which gives us a false sense of superiority. But that being a rock is no different than being a person. Never mind, it gets all confused, but certainly a reflective response is what that would get.
Yeah, it gets tricky to explain it the more you lean into the subtleties of what the phrases are pointing towards.
I have a question,
Mm-hmm.
but given the readings, I feel like if I ask a question, somebody's going to hit me with a stick. But on page 112, in the second paragraph at the top, it says, awakening does not mean gradually waking up. It means being completely awake. I didn't think that was true. I thought I was in the process of waking up. I think I'm in a process of waking up.
I highlighted that one too, Ed, for the same reason.
I highlighted that one too.
So what's your take on it?
But it's wrong.
Okay.
It's easy. We can just move on. No, I guess my take in it is that, yeah, I awakening for me began with realizing that I needed to awaken. That like this readings and doing this book and taking this class is part of a process of awakening.
Is it more?
I want to look at a sentence in the middle of the second paragraph on page 108.
Okay.
As soon as a single atom comes into existence, the whole earth is contained within it. Birth and death are simultaneous, and awakening is, well, you can't say this in words, right? But awakening is either is now or you don't realize it, but it is now anyway.
All right. Sounds like we got a debate going. Let's
Pardon?
keep at it.
Well, is it more that you awakened and what, and then now you're becoming? That you do awaken once, and after that you're becoming. One point of view. I don't know.
No, I think it's more like I just realized that I'm awake, but then a split second later, I've not realized it.
I've stopped noticing.
What is it that the atomic scientists are saying now, that it's possible to be both in existence and not in existence as a small particle? Simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I'm in a little bit of a transition zone right now, and I felt different. It struck me the other morning, and then I got unstruck. But
What do you mean, Shokai? I didn't follow that last.
I felt a little awakening. I felt that that the whole universe was in existence. Mm-hmm. Simultaneously with, I don't know, me. Mm-hmm. But that faded pretty quick.
That reminds me of the story of Dogen's awakening experience. Dogen sitting in, he had traveled to China. There's just so much to his life story. But he had traveled to China and was studying with Rujing, and he's sitting in the meditation hall, and he hears Rujing say something about body and mind dropping away. And the story goes that Rujing was saying it to another student, and Dogen overheard it. Something shifted for him. And so later he goes to Rujing, and he said that he had that experience, body and mind dropping away. Mm-hmm. And then Rujing said, and he made some sort of question as to, and then what happened? And he said, dropping away, dropped away.
The last part again?
Dropping away, dropped away.
Okay.
But this question of awakening being gradual or being completely awake, there's multiple ways we could read that. And so this is one of those things that I want to point out. It's not as if there's a right way to view this phrase or these ideas and a wrong way, because This is a sort of thing where multiple things can be happening at once. It's a little bit multi-layered. So one of the ways we can look at this is addressing this debate about whether enlightenment is sudden or gradual. And so there are philosophies in Buddhism that say that enlightenment happens in an instant, and you can never know when or never know where. And that's sometimes where we get these dramatic gestures or the emphasis on turning words in Zen, that there's some stimulus and the response is a moment of enlightenment or an awakening experience. There's other schools of Buddhism that say that, no, actually, there's a path to follow and there's a prescribed way to do it. And if you do these studies and these practices in this way, that eventually you will achieve enlightenment. And these techniques and practices and path and the way it's mapped out is all guaranteed to work because it's worked for the masters before them.
And that's the last sentence in the paragraph I cited.
Back on 108.
After a long, long time, you will eventually, naturally find a way.
Yep. 3 long kalpas is what it's said as. It takes 3 long kalpas to reach enlightenment.
How many kalpas?
3.
3. Okay.
And kalpas are defined in multiple ways, sort of as the length of time it would take an eagle with a feather in her beak to
flying over the mountain.
Flying over the mountain once every, millennia to wear down the mountain.
With a cloth that would wear away the rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kyogen described a kalpa as the time between big bangs.
Ordinary people wake up every day, and that without.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, so there's different ways you could look at this. And so, like with teachings like this, you can read it, and of course, whatever makes sense to you is the way you'll read it because that's your view. Or you can start to question it. What does this really mean? Or it becomes a point of conversation and dialogue between you and your teacher. And that's often something that is very important in koan practice, although it's not often articulated unless you're doing formal koan practice. Like you can pick up the Blue Cliff Record and read it from front to back, right? Koan after koan, story after story. You can find Baizhang's Fox in there as well. And you can read it as literature. Many of the stories don't make sense to the sort of superficial mind, the common mind. But you can take these stories and use them as dialogue or tools or points of discussion with a teacher, and then certain parts get pulled out. And rarely is it the student asks, what about this phrase? What is it like? Awakening does not mean gradually. What does that mean? And rarely is the teacher going to say, it means da 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 da. What's going to happen is the teacher's going to turn around and say, what is gradually? What does that mean? What is awakening? What is not awakening? What is not gradual? And so then over time, there's this discussion that happens, and of course, various other aspects of what's happening in the student's Dharma understanding comes forward and becomes part of this investigation. But the whole point of this is to help the student reach that point of realization or understanding. And sometimes when that moment of understanding comes, it has nothing to do with the phrase that's being discussed. But there's an aspect to focusing the mind in a particular way that allows that shift to happen, that transformation to happen, which leans a little bit more on that sudden side than this 3 long kalpa Like, just practice the paramitas. Just practice the precepts. You'll get there eventually. We're going to do this character work, and eventually all of your obscurations are going to be purified.
Well, there is the kind of truism that if you keep following in that direction, eventually you'll get there.
Yeah. Or, you never know when enlightenment is going to hit, so you might as well do the practice.
You might just get gradually soaked by the Dharma mist.
Then lightning strikes.
I'd like to think it has something to do with knowing the names, the personal names of the flowers and the plants that are outside your house.
There's a certain, I was talking about this with somebody recently, and there's a certain sense like, you might have the lightning strike of enlightenment about something, and, you're sitting there basking in it. But on the other hand, there's a certain level of hubris to that because if you are enlightened at some point, then there's still the discipline you've got to maintain. So it's sort of still a struggle in a sense. So it's sort of an interesting thing about maintaining that discipline. I've got to say that consciousness is a source of great problems. And it's sort of like, I like that too. I saw that. And that there's a, what do you call it? Like the idea, well, what is there beyond consciousness? Or, how does one perceive beyond what one perceives? It's a really interesting question. I liked the bit before that. I've been thinking about this bit too. It's not so much the whole paragraph. It's the third paragraph on page 111. Not so much, it starts with now, then, but I particularly like the last sentence. When you can see into the light of the spirit, then you can talk about the path. The path is where the spirit develops, and it is where consciousness comes from. So that really attracted me, and I was sort of thinking about it over a period of time. So I made some photos, and the first one's very. There you go. That's the first one. I made it up on Saddleback Mountain.
Can you screen share those if I co-host you? Because I can't. It's hard to see them. Would that be possible?
You can do it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's hard.
So there's two photos here. One's
now you should be able to share those.
If you can see them, one's just a plain old path, like duh. But the other one, and my wife and I both saw this, and I go, wow. And what it is, it's part of a tree where the bark has fallen away. The bark has fallen off the tree. And in the layer between the bark and the wood, you can see all the paths made by the insect that's been eating the wood. And I thought, wow, look at that. It's sort of like this path. It's in its own world, like we don't normally see these paths. And I thought, wow, that's just so exciting. So it sort of raised, I sort of liked it. So I sort of made a photo of it, and I thought I'd share it with you. And I'll go back to this other book for a second, because I really like this too. I had this really insane dream after thinking about all this, and then reading it. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, yeah. Master Yunmen entered the Dharma hall and said, a bodhisattva striving for wisdom must be able to know the illness of sentient beings. Then he will be also capable of knowing his own illness, the illness of the bodhisattva striving for wisdom. Well, if there's someone here who can understand this, he ought to step forward and try demonstrating it to us all, okay? Which is sort of very cool, but it's really this sort of thing about, I really liked it, I thought. And I had this incredible dream. It was sort of like a mixture of a couple of things. And it was like I didn't want to wake up from it. I wanted to stay in the dream state. I'm sort of lying in bed like, I'm away, but I'm still trying to maintain this sort of thing. And it was sort of like I was in these islands, a big Game of Thrones, and I was trying to find the grave of my ancestors, you know, and it was really cool. And then there was these priests, and I'd touch the priest's arm, you know, but then I'd see them, and they became translucent, and you could see there's all this white, and their organs, and I was going, wow, this is really amazing, you know, like what is it these people must be suffering, you know, like or experiencing, you know, like, and you know, like that they must be feeling these things, you know, like that they have to embody in themselves, you know, like I go, wow. It was a sort of very strange dream, and there were a lot of different components to it, but it was sort of like a fairy tale. It was really sort of strange. And there's all this sort of emotional stuff linked to it. So anyway, that's my bit. The other photo is the other one with the, that's got the wood tracks on it, the wood paths.
Let me see.
The second
You're
one.
showing that, Peter.
Yeah. Not so much the walking through the forest, but the path of the termites, or the.
Trying to find that one.
Walking, but
It's the
it's
second one. It's the.
Okay,
the
getting there.
The last one in the chat.
Yeah, this
walking,
one.
but it's 5:20. Does somebody else want to share as Taco's pulling up this last photo of Peter's?
I just love this line at the bottom of 106. A lot of time does not wait for anyone. When you breathe out, there's no guarantee you'll breathe in again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
True thing. Shokai, I want to remark on something you said earlier about knowing the personal names of all the flowers and plants outside your house or outside your door. I can't remember how you phrased it, but there was something there that was just so beautifully intimate.
Yeah.
That is what living in harmony is.
Well, something that I have a Kindle, so I don't have page numbers on my Kindle, but there's a paragraph that starts, different states of mundane existence may alternate and change. And then the last sentence is, and then you are ignorant of the pattern of nature and you cut off the source of continual regeneration. I thought this whole discussion about feelings versus nature really interesting, and about how if you have too much feeling, then that you get all hung up and tangled up. But if you don't have any feeling, then you end up becoming a terrible person. So you have to have both. But then he talks about the difference between nature, which is, and feeling, and about how in Buddhism you teach a lot more using nature than feeling. And down below, when he says, and I had on here because I wasn't quite sure if I understood it, it says, if you pretend to be beyond death and rebirth and take a nihilistic view of them, so saying you don't care one way or another, then you are ignorant of the pattern of nature and you cut off the source of continual regeneration. And I wasn't quite sure I got what he was saying there about that you have to appreciate the idea that of death and rebirth in order. I don't understand. I'm not quite understand about the continual regeneration and how that fits in. And I was wondering if anybody in the class could help with any kind of.
I don't know if it's true or not, but when I think of that, I think of how life passes from life to life. We donate cells that become a person, which donate cells which become a person. being outside of the cycle of if you don't die, you can't, you a cow gives its body to be eaten, which produces more life. To be part of the cycle of birth and death is to be life itself.
But then he says here, if people are educated on the basis of nature, they get beyond death and birth. But then
Life is greater than both. It is both, but it's greater.
yeah, but then he contradicts himself down below. So I'm not quite sure I understand.
Do you mean where he says, if you pretend to be beyond death and rebirth? Is that where you say he contradicts him?
Right.
See, I think he's just, I've read that as just, if you can't fake that understanding. If you pretend if you pretend to understand that, then I don't know. That was just how.
Yeah, I read that way too.
Yeah.
I think the way I read it was if the piece about nature is emptiness, and so I was confused by the whole thing about feeling in nature, and I was curious about like what was being translated. It felt like a translation issue in terms of my understanding, but I really love how we talk about emptiness is not nihilistic. It is a source of continual regeneration, because the way it lands with me is, if I have the view of emptiness and I'm seeing things as phenomena or conditioning, there's so much possibility. There's so much more possibility for what could happen next or what's happening now. And I experience that as regenerative.
So if we're looking at that phrase or that word nature as emptiness or reality as it is, then what would feeling be? If he's pairing nature and feeling.
Yeah, I would say it landed for me as conditioning, because mostly I didn't know what he was talking about until I got to the part on 115 where he talks about feeling being artifice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then my red energy self got my hackles up a little bit, because it's a little pejorative, and he's talking about affection and intimacy. But it was interesting, this sentence, but intimacy makes distance. That definitely jarred me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In a productive way.
Mm-hmm.
How was it productive, Camille?
You know, I've been struggling with the word intimacy, particularly since starting residency. It's just such a different form of intimacy. And so, yeah, so it's just been a little ongoing for me of realizing ways in which I'm afraid of intimacy that I didn't even realize I was afraid of it. You know, I think of it like, Teiko, yesterday you talked about, like, you know, me being a good connector or something, or, you know, and I like people, man, but there's something core that is afraid. So I'm curious about that.
Thank you.
So in this section, he's got feeling is the beginning of being, and then later on, nature is the attainment of non-being. So if we look at feeling as self, or a conceptual sense of small self, and nature as that sense of emptiness, then we're back to that sort of precious mirror samadhi view of light and dark, good and bad dualities, with a pointer there to transcend those dualities. But transcending duality does not eliminate duality. It shifts the view from separate to whole.
And you need form to understand no form, and no
Exactly.
form to understand form.
And there you've got the beginnings of the Heart Sutra. Yep. Yay. It's 5:28. We have 2 minutes left. Our next class is on September 13th, so we've got another break. So next class is in 2 weeks. and we'll look at the house. I just passed it. Buy-in. Yep. And then that will be the last class in this series. So we'll look at the readings in that chapter, but then we'll also go back and do just a brief synopsis or overview of each of these 5 houses. So given that these houses were constructed after the fact, they were put together for a particular reason with a particular theme. So what might those themes be? If you were to rename them in your own words, how would you rename them? Sound good? Alrighty. I'll see you all next class, next Wednesday night, who knows, maybe I'll show up at Meta Monday tomorrow. Surprise everybody.
You start your internship soon, right?
September 21st.
Oh, okay, 21st.
About a few weeks.
Yeah, so you get it.
I still have to redo my last set of revisions for my paper, and I've got some like big view planning for end of life care for Dharma Rain. So that's what I'll be working on. Shokai, is it okay to say all the best to you?
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
Please.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
If you know when you're going in, I'll offer some blessings at that time.
6:30 in the morning.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Best wishes, Shokai.
Thank you. And to Dixie and your family.
Yes, yes. Yeah. All right.
Bye.
I don't want to hang up exactly.
What did you say, Jacob?
I said I just didn't want to hang up. Those seconds of silence were lovely, I thought.
They are lovely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
You didn't get to talk about the little stories in that last section.
We didn't get there, did we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The little stories.
Those crazy little stories make me want to take my Kindle and throw it across the room.
Oh my God. Laura, it was so helpful to hear you talk about Yuman. I thought can I just use a bad word right now? I thought Yuman was a dick. I was like, oh my God, I would never want that guy as my teacher, ever. And so it was so awesome to hear your response to it.
It sounded like an old an old curmudgeon,
Yeah, a lot of them do. And the whole thing with awakening.
Get out of my room,
Yeah. It's so toxically masculine, and a lot of that are awakening with a fist, a shout, or because I had this one time at Denkaway with at Sesshin, and I was having this horrible time where I thought everybody was going to a party where I wasn't invited, and when the kitchen in Domyo said to me, "Hi, Emily, would you like a cookie?" So she broke all these rules. She knew my name. She spoke out loud, and she offered me a cookie. And I'm not going to say I became completely enlightened, but it sure was a moment for me. And so I always read that thing about a fist and a shout and a whisk. I always secretly add a cookie to that list of things that could wake you up.
Just be nice to people. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just loved where he said, he asked the guy where he's from. He says, Korea. And he says, well, you deserved a thrashing. I just thought that, I don't know. I have a funny sense of humor, I suppose, but I just thought it was really, really funny. A lot of it that he talks about. And I just thought it would be fun if we had talked about the stories a little bit, because
maybe there'll be time next week, or you could write something to the Google group, and we could talk about it on the mailing list.
I'd be totally into talking about stuff online.
Yeah.
But Yeah, some of it, it would even be fun to read one of these stories out loud and make the voices, you know.
Theater.
Yeah, but you're right. It is kind of a male thing to be tough and all that. But I've had some female teachers. I remember in college and graduate school that were really
Yeah.
rough teachers, you know. And if you came to class prepared, they didn't have any time for you, you know. And
Yeah. I think of it as Japanese cultural quite a lot too. Just, you know, very kind of military or something. I don't know. My prejudice.
Lexi, do you have any weavings like within arm's reach that you can hold up and show us?
Maybe. Hold on a second. Yeah. Here's my black and purple scarf
Oh my
that
God.
I really don't know what I'm going to do with. I need to finish the ends of it. Perhaps put beads on it, you know, if I can get over to the studio. Anyway, I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to have to figure out. I think I'm going to have to just tell people, you know, I've got this stuff, you can have it or pay me what you will, because I've got so many scarves, I don't have room for more. So
Nice.
That's beautiful.
it you know, this is actually made of bamboo, but it's very soft. It's very soft, and you know, it's not as I wanted it even softer than it really is. But anyway.
Does it have a little sheen?
It does. It does have a little sheen. Yeah, it does. And it's black, and you can't really see that there is a little kind of like flowers on it, you know, all over.
Beautiful.
And
Wow.
so
how long does that take to make?
You know, I don't know. I never track my time because it takes, you know, half the time you're taking stuff out instead of putting the thread in, you're taking it out, you know, and it you know, and when the whole process, you know, just even threading the loom can take practically a week. So,
Gosh.
you know, depending on how complex the pattern is. So anyway, yeah, what's on the loom now, I can't, my computer's too big to move it over there, but anyway, so it's one way of feeling creative and productive. So
I'm gonna go make dinner.
okay, all right.
I'll bring your thermos
tomorrow.
bottle by. It might not be tonight after all.
Okay,
Go
okay.
feed the boys, but
You know, whenever, but you know, doesn't have. There's no hurry about it. If it hasn't been opened, though, you might open and dump the tea out.
Okay.
I'm not in a hurry to get it back. You know, if I were in a hurry, I would have come down to get it. Yeah. Just haven't. Oh, the other thing I have to ask you is that I put a name on the merit list, but it didn't get on last week.
Oh, okay. Tell me who it is, and I'll make sure it gets on right now.
I did it through the website, so I figured you'd get it, but maybe I didn't do it right or whatever. You know?
So by sending a message through the website?
Put it on, yeah, there's a place there where you can add names for the merit list.
Huh. Through the newsletter or the website?
The website, I think.
Okay, well,
anyway I'll give you the name. The name is Nadine.
Okay.
Do you need a last name? It's
only if you want to.
Penny. Nadine Penny.
Okay. Well, I'll do that right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Take
I'll
care.
see you when I see you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.